Hey everyone, in today's video I want to talk about 5 things that I think really differentiate professional content from amateur and independent content. And if you can incorporate these 5 things into your work, you're going to step up your content's professionalism that much more and sound that much better. Before we get started, if you enjoy these videos, you want to support the channel, head over to alexknickerbocker.com. I've got a whole bunch of royalty-free sound effects for your use in any project, any kind of content you're working on. You can also donate to the channel if you'd like. Anything really helps me spend more time sharing all this audio information with everybody. All right, the first thing that I think really sets professional content apart from amateur content is the use of Foley. Foley is all the everyday detail that you never even think about in terms of sound that doesn't get recorded on set and has to be added in after the fact. That's everything from footsteps to hand pats to cloth movement. Even when somebody turns their head on screen, there's nothing there from production most of the time, so you actually have to go in and record some cloth movement in front of a microphone in a quiet studio so that it can sound natural against production audio. And if you do it right, nobody's ever going to notice this. It's going to sound just right under music. It's not going to poke through. It's going to just feel natural. But it all has to be there where somebody is going to notice it's missing and it takes them out of the experience. That brings me to the second component here, and that is frame accurate editing with sound. You don't want to just be throwing sounds into a timeline just randomly and have it kind of sync up maybe, but that's a couple frames out, but who's really going to notice? People are going to notice, and it's going to feel a little odd and pull people out of the experience, especially with something like dialogue. If dialogue slips just a couple of frames out, it starts looking really weird all of a sudden, and you don't really want to have that happening when somebody's trying to be involved in the story. But that goes for sound effects and Foley too, and there's not really any cheap or fast way around it. You kind of have to sit down, especially with something like footstep Foley, and you have to go to the exact frame that somebody's weight falls on their heel or falls on their toe, and you have to sync up a sound effect right there. When it's done right, it looks perfect and seamless and smooth. When it's done wrong, it looks totally unprofessional and sounds really weird, and people don't like it. The third component here is a whole series of videos and maybe whole YouTube channels unto itself, and that's mix balance. There's a lot of different ways and a lot of different ideas on how to get a mix sounding correct and how to get it sounding right. That's a subjective art, and that's why the creative space is what it is. That's why we do the stuff that we do. However, you can definitely have a bad mix. There are arbitrarily and objectively bad mixes out there. And when you don't have something well balanced so that it sounds real, it sounds organic, it sounds the way that it should, people are going to notice. And if you do it bad enough, that's going to detract from the story and the experience, and people aren't really going to want to sit through whatever content you might have. That can go for something as simple as dialogue, where if your EQ on your voice sounds really, really aggressive or harsh, that's not something you can listen to for an hour on end. If you've got an audiobook or a podcast or something, people are going to turn it off and they're not even going to know why. They're just going to be irritated by the voice. If you have really out of balance music, then that's going to sound unprofessional. If it's really, really hot and then it ducks back to nothing as soon as there's dialogue, or you can't hear the dialogue over the music or something along those lines. Again, this is a whole topic unto itself, but mixing with intention is a really good thought exercise to kind of get into that headspace. Why should something be really crazy and abrasive versus really quiet and subdued? Do you want something to really distract or grab the attention of the audience? Do you want it to just be completely smooth and cohesive and not draw attention to itself? That's going to depend on the content. It's going to depend on the creatives behind it. There are all different nuances there. But again, thinking about why you want a mix done a certain way versus not is really important for any kind of content you're doing. The fourth component here ties right in. That's the proper use of EQ. Equalizers are probably the single most important tool in any kind of mixing work, or really any kind of audio work that you can get. This is going to solve noise problems by itself. It's going to save audio that wasn't useful or sounded way too harsh or maybe wasn't present enough. You can do a lot more with EQ than meets the eye if you know what you're doing. So being able to layer sounds, balance them the right way using EQ is a really big component of a professional mix. Knowing and understanding what frequencies occupy the spectrum and which of those frequencies are going to sound pleasant in a sound versus not, There's no real shortcut to this besides sitting down and listening to things. Listen to great sounding films, listen to great sounding television shows or music tracks, and just try and hear for yourself what works and what doesn't. Listening critically like that and being able to translate what you get out of those experiences into any kind of audio work or any kind of decision making you have to deal with in audio is going to be a huge component of making the right choices with EQ and therefore, again, getting more professional audio. And as anybody who's done any kind of mixing or EQ knows, the most challenging part of that is the creative use and the balanced use of low end content. That's your bass guitars, that's your kick drums, that's all of your sub explosion LFE kinds of stuff that you want people to feel, but you can't overwhelm everybody with because it's just going to sound like mud if you have too many low frequencies going on. That's a real challenge because pretty much every sound out there has some low frequency component to it. And especially in the music world, you're going to find yourself having to try and really meld everything together in a certain frequency range between somewhere like 80 up to about 500 to 800 hertz. That whole area is occupied by pretty much every instrument there is. It's going to be really challenging to balance your mixes if you don't have any idea what sounds occupy what space. Low end specifically is the big challenge here. In the theatrical and the cinematic world, you have dedicated low frequency emitting devices that will take all those frequencies for you. So you can sort of separate things out, not just by speakers and not just by placement, but also by frequency content. When you're sitting in a theater and you get that big low end punch, the cinematic booms that make things just feel like they have weight to them. You know, a huge spaceship goes by and you get that enormous low end rumble that just makes it feel enormous. Creative use of stuff like that can really add or subtract weight to whatever is going on screen. So if you want something to sound weak, you can remove a whole lot of that low end content and it's going to sound thin and it's not going to be very intimidating. It's going to be a little bit less present in a lot of ways. And that works with everything: dialogue, gunshots, spaceships, explosions, dinosaurs, whatever. If you want it to sound enormous, generally low frequency content is going to be necessary, in addition to loudness, of course. But loud things don't necessarily have weight to them, they just have amplitude. If you bring in that low frequency content, especially when you're working with an LFE of some kind, so you can separate out all that low end into one speaker and just punch the audience with that, that's going to have a lot more weight than just having uncontrolled low end the entire time you've got any kind of sound playing. When it comes to using low end creatively to add weight to certain moments or add emphasis and punctuate certain elements of a film, that's a really, really effective way to just make things feel that much more gravity and that much heavier as they happen. So hopefully those 5 elements of professional sound give you some really cool ideas to try in your own creative workflows, and maybe think outside the box a little bit when it comes to your use of mixing techniques and creative sound effects. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and hit subscribe. Comment below with any questions you've got. I'm over on Instagram at AXK, so come follow me over there. And as always, thanks for watching.